yet most important period of your life, when to escape the effects of radioactive fallout for perhaps as long as the next 2 weeks, you will be deprived of all the conveniences of modern life. When you will live under crowded conditions, almost elbow to elbow with your neighbor. When your diet, your personal hygiene, and other habits will undergo drastic change. Until the passage of time has decayed radioactive substances and fallout to a point where it will be safe for you to take up your life where you left it. Throughout the city, throughout our nation, many millions of people have embarked upon this same experience in survival, aware of the location of the nearest public shelter. Know where this sign is in your neighborhood, for it designates public and privately owned buildings being used for community shelters, marked and licensed with the consent of their owners, and pre-stocked by the federal government with austere supplies for its occupants for a 2-week period. Food, water, sanitation supplies, medical kits, radiological monitoring equipment. In sum, just enough supplies to meet your basic needs to sustain your life. Quiet in the suburbs. In the wake of disaster, you and members of your family are entering upon your own experience in survival, in your own home shelter. Pre-stocked with food and water supplies, enjoying certain comforts denied those who will live out this period in a public shelter, but wholly dependent on your own decisions. In fact, strictly on your own for your existence until it is safe for you to leave the shelter. In both situations, the public shelter and the home shelter, the principles of healthful living are the same. This film will show you what you may expect in shelter living. It will examine important principles of sanitation and hygiene which, if adhered to, will mean that you can emerge from an abnormal period of crowded living more than just alive. Instead, ready and physically able to work with your neighbors to restore your normal way of life. When you go to the public shelter, don't bring too many things with you. However, if you're the parent of an infant child, you'll have to bring formulas and other baby foods. And if you have certain dietary needs, you'll have to bring these special foods along, although they should be foods that do not require cooking. In fact, don't bring anything that needs cooking. That also goes for perishable foods. They'll have to be left outside with the shelter manager faced with the problem later on of what to do with them. In short, the less you bring to the public shelter, the better. Your home for perhaps the next 2 weeks. Not all community shelters will look the same or be outfitted the same. Some will have bunks or cots. Some will provide blankets. Some may have, in addition to the austere food and water supplies provided by the federal government, supplementary supplies along with the means of preparing and serving them. Nevertheless, though there is no standard interior or uniform provisioning for the public shelter, there will be, even in minimal conditions, the essentials to get you through this most important period. Waiting out decay of dangerous radioactive fallout from a nuclear disaster. You've unpacked, taken your bearings. But almost as soon as you've settled down, your youngsters, just as on every other outing, begin to complain of thirst. What do you do for water in a public shelter? Each of these containers holds 70 quarts of drinking water, with 10 drums provided for this 50-person capacity shelter. That means you and everyone else will be allotted 3 1/2 gallons of drinking water during your shelter stay. Divide 14 days into 3 1/2 gallons, and your daily allotment will be little over 1 quart of water for drinking purposes. However, it's the responsibility of the shelter manager to decide just how much you will receive. In fact, any water inside the building is safe for drinking purposes if the water from outside has been shut off. The moment everyone is waiting for, lunch. If you have brought infant foods, they can be warmed by exposing their containers directly to body heat. As for your own lunch, your main and probably only dish in a federally stocked shelter will be no different from what you've had for breakfast or dinner. A simple diet, easy to fix, and no dishes to wash. In short, a biscuit similar in taste and appearance to a graham cracker, with enough nutritional value to supply you with slightly more than 700 calories per day, sufficient to keep you going during your inactive shelter life. This being your first day in the shelter, the usual ration is supplemented by perishable fruits brought by some of the occupants, washed and peeled to eliminate danger of contamination. However, don't bank on this as a steady treat. Chances are your daily menu will consist solely of the biscuit. In the home shelter, the family has stocked its water supply beforehand. Sealed containers of various types storing water indefinitely. Enough to provide each member of the family with 2 quarts each day. With the average healthy adult drinking 1 quart of water daily during the shelter stay. But there are ways to supplement this home shelter water supply. For example, canned or bottled soft drinks, as well as milk, soups, fruit juices, and liquids from canned fruits and vegetables. However, at the first warning of possible disaster, the family head took a number of precautions to ensure an even larger backup to the home shelter water supply. On the alert signal, I knew I had certain things to do. First, turn off the main water intake valve controlling the water supply into our home so that water contaminated by fallout would not be drawn into our household system. Next, to permit the free flow of water in our system, opening the hot water faucet very slightly in our top floor bathroom, a means of allowing air to leak in, thus releasing water at lower levels. Even before those steps, however, I turned off the gas to our basement hot water tank. Most homes have a 30 to 40 gallon reserve supply of water. Still another source of pure water, about 5 gallons in each of our toilet storage tanks. Water in the bowl, of course, is not safe for drinking. Melted ice cubes. In an emergency, even this would help. And so, though our community water supply might become contaminated by fallout, my family, I felt, was protected. So far, so good. But what about the food supply for the home shelter?
I'd carefully prepared for an emergency such as this. Stocking our shelter from normal food supplies kept in the kitchen cupboard. A variety of canned and packaged foods, everything from meats to vegetables, soups and milk. In fact, various kinds of beverages, packaged goodies for the youngsters, foods to be rotated every 1 to 3 years to keep their taste and nutritional value, and enough for a 2-week supply for each member of our family. This being our first day in the shelter, to keep up our spirits, I planned a normal meal. Later on, we'd cut down our food intake, though our meals would be on a regular schedule. By setting a routine, it would give us something to look forward to. And at least one hot meal a day, along with a hot drink of some kind. Though it wasn't necessary to heat or cook most of our already prepared food. Too much cooking can cause problems in the home shelter.
Food, water. But now the need arises for a third essential. Sanitation, or more bluntly, toilet facilities. Let's face up right now to some unpleasant facts. In both public and home shelter living, with water in scarce supply, human waste can't be flushed away by pressure on a handle. Used instead is a throwback to the old-fashioned privy, but now located inside your shelter. Actually, a chemical toilet with a plastic container. The sanitation kit of the federally marked shelter provides materials for assembly of a chemical toilet, complete with toilet tissue, waterless hand cleaner, deodorant, polyethylene bag, also a seat, to be set in place over an empty water drum, now used as a commode. When the bag is full, the top is drawn together. Then, with the tight-fitting lid in place, the drum will be moved aside or outside the shelter. Then, with the tight-fitting lid in place, the drum will be moved aside or outside the shelter. To maintain personal cleanliness and to prevent the spread of germs, it's important after each use of public or home shelter toilet facilities to wash your hands. Remember, under crowded conditions, this is the area most vulnerable to the breakdown of health, to the start of disease. So ends the first day in the public shelter, in the home shelter.
As the days went by, one of our biggest problems was the disposal of human wastes and garbage. My husband had made an improvised commode with a plastic liner inserted in the pail. When the plastic bag was full, it was disposed of in a large, leak-proof can just outside our shelter. Within our shelter, for each member of our family, we had on hand 2 rolls of toilet tissue. Also, a 2-week supply of old newspapers in which to wrap garbage and other wastes. For burying these wastes outdoors when the radiation level had become low enough, we kept a shovel available. We also kept on hand a supply of wax and plastic-coated paper garbage disposal bags.
As shelter manager, I was alert to the threat of disease. An ordinary housefly, but with a disease-spreading ability that could make every occupant of our shelter a victim of dysentery, typhoid fever, or another serious disorder as deadly in its effects as a nuclear weapon. Because flies lay their eggs in warm, moist, organic material, we made a special point of eliminating their breeding grounds, using strict methods of fly control. We insisted that the shelter be clean of all debris, refuse, garbage, as well as body waste. Waged an intensive daily campaign to kill bedbugs, lice, mosquitoes, and other small insects with household insecticides, using dusts and wettable powders rather than sprays or aerosols in the confined shelter space.
The long, empty days go by as other problems arise. In the public shelter, a death, and need to dispose of the body. In this case, the body is placed outside the shelter until a grave can be dug. In a home shelter, the stored water supply for drinking and washing has been consumed more rapidly than expected. From emergency news broadcasts, you learn that community water supplies have been contaminated by fallout. With the passage of time still insufficient to reduce radioactivity to a safe level. The need now arises to utilize the backup water supply in the home or public shelter system. But how can you be sure it will be free from germs? Boiling for at least 1 minute is the best and easiest way to purify water. Or you can purify water using household bleach or ordinary tincture of iodine, adding 10 drops of bleach or 20 drops of tincture of iodine to each gallon of water. Wait it as long as you possibly could, after weighing the chances of exposure to fallout against hunger and thirst.
Exactly what are the chances of fallout contaminating food?
Be guided by this rule. Any danger from food contaminated by fallout is not from the food itself, but from radioactive dust particles that may be in contact with the food. Therefore, most canned and packaged foods will be safe to eat unless the containers are pierced or broken. Wipe the dust from the container with a damp cloth. When you're through, dispose of the cloth in the garbage can outside your shelter. Remember, fallout in food is harmful. You can't taste it, probably won't see it. To be safe, it is best to treat everything as though it has been in contact with fallout. Whenever handling anything that may have been exposed to fallout, to protect your hands, be sure to wear rubber gloves or use a paper or rag. Then carefully clean your hands. In fact, your health and the health of your family, whether in the city, the suburb, or on the farm, may depend on the rigid observance of these and other simple rules of shelter living. Here are some other health tips. Food stored in protected areas, such as cellars, is safe to eat. Vegetables like these are safe if carefully scrubbed and peeled before eating. Fruits like these are safe if peeled and washed. Remove the outer layer of leaves of a tight-headed vegetable such as a cabbage and wash. Smooth-skinned vegetables and fruits too small to peel are relatively safe if thoroughly washed under running water. It is best not to use milk from animals grazing or feeding outdoors during the fallout period. However, if you or your child are going hungry, use this milk. Chances are you'll suffer no effects. On the other hand, milk from animals kept in barns or other covered areas throughout the fallout period will be safe. Animals exposed to radiation can be used for food if they have not been sick or have not died from illness. other internal organs that may have absorbed radioactive substances are discarded. With the passing days, radioactivity in fallout continues to decrease, rapidly at first, more slowly as time goes on. In the public shelter, you're in the home stretch of what has probably been the most trying period of your life. Meanwhile, there has been no let-up in the campaign being waged by shelter occupants to maintain sanitation and personal cleanliness. Effort expended each day in proper disposal of human wastes, in the elimination of body-infesting insects by use of DDT dust, by traps and poisons to control mice and rats, kept, however, beyond reach of children. In the home shelter, you're also coming through the severe experience of shelter living in good shape, probably for wet, but physically in spite of the drastic in your way of life. Since there is opportunity to seek relief for the family's somewhat spartan. However, there are rules to follow. For those in this situation, as well as those caught short of food following any type of disaster, avoid eating spoiled foods that can cause sickness, even death. Despite rotten spots, fruits and vegetables are safe to eat. Bread and other baked goods, even when moldy, are still edible. Frozen vegetables that have thawed, even soured, are safe if first thoroughly cooked. In fact, the most reliable guide to spoilage is your own nose and tongue. If any food has an extremely sickening smell or taste, don't eat it. However, molds are no indication of spoilage, for molds themselves are harmless when eaten. If they form on the outer surfaces of meats, such as beef, they can be trimmed off, with the remaining meat, even though having an unpleasant smell, safe and nourishing to eat after being thoroughly cooked. That also applies to large solid pieces of lamb out of refrigeration for several days. Beware, however, of other fresh meats such as pork, fish, and fowl. If out of refrigeration for even several hours, they should never be eaten. Meats of any kind that have been fully cured and are labeled "requires no refrigeration" will probably be safe to eat even after months without refrigeration. As for preserved and canned goods, beware of souring or the appearance of bubbles in their juices, often indicating the presence of a deadly form of poisoning, even though there may be nothing unusual in their smell. Radioactivity in your area has been checked. I repeat, radioactivity in your area has been checked. It is now safe to leave your shelter. Report immediately to your neighborhood leader to assist in recovery actions so that community services may soon be restored. I repeat, radioactivity in your area has... You are about to emerge from your ordeal more than just alive. Physically prepared to pitch in with your neighbor, to work for restoration of your neighborhood, restoration of your community, restoration of our nation.